Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining our webinar today. Today's training series webinar, we have Megan with us. She's an account manager on our partnerships team, and I'll let her introduce herself, but she's going to be talking about skills and using skills in Analyst. So we're really excited to have her doing the webinar. If you have questions as we go, please type your questions in the question box. We will leave time for questions at the end of the webinar. Everyone who registered for this webinar will receive a recording of the session. So if you can't stay for the whole thing, no worries. You'll get the recording of the session after. Those usually go out by the end of the week. So you'll get that in your inbox. So thanks again for joining us, and I will turn it over to Megan to talk to us about skills.
Awesome. Thanks, Chantel. It's great to be here and talk to everyone today about skills. It's a very, very hot topic, so I'm excited to kind of dive right in. But I'm Megan Watanabe. I'm an account manager at Lightcast with our education partnerships team. So I primarily work with businesses and organizations and nonprofits who work in the education space, but are not technically, colleges or universities or an institution themselves. So why skills? Really, it's something that I talk about with my colleagues and my clients pretty much every day. So it's a pretty hot topic right now. So I'm just going to dive right in. I have a couple slides, and if you see me look over to my left, I have another screen with just some notes. I'll probably be glancing over there. Make sure my slide is working. All right. So why skills? So skills are kind of that common language between students and job seekers and businesses and institutions. It's really that basic unit to define an economy, really describe a person's job. That can probably be more accurate than a person's job title. So diving into more of the responsibilities and actual skills that they'll need for a role, as opposed to just like a hierarchy of a program or an occupation. So at Lightcast, we pull skills from millions of sources through job postings, resumes, and online profiles. So really allowing us to kind of hone in on real people in the real world. What are the skills that they have? What are the skills that employers are looking for? And a resource that I'm going to hop into really quick is this skills library that is free at skills.lightcast.io. But you can look at, our open source library of over 32,000 skills. Scrolling down a bit here, we have our skills library. You can explore our skill categories and subcategories here, and our skills extractor. So just to kind of use this tool real time right now, I'm just going to look up a very popular skill, SQL, and look at that. Click on it, and you'll see related skills there. So in the library, we can kind of see a definition, related skills as well, just some quick job posting data, what are the top companies posting with this skill, the actual job titles that they're using, posting trends, and then live job postings. Once you're in a skill page, I really want to point out this, how do we define a skill? This FAQ page is really, really valuable in kind of that deeper dive of the taxonomy, how we kind of organize our skills at Lightcast. So I highly recommend kind of taking some time and learning for yourself, what is the skills data that I'm really looking at? So we really want to be transparent and communicate, what we're looking at and how we take care of these skills. Going back to the slide. All right, so different ways of using skills, depending on who you are, there's lots of different ways to use this skills data. So for learners, students, and job seekers, we can really use Lightcast skills to write better resumes, discover top skills in demand. For colleges and institutions, we can use them to design relevant programs and help students communicate their skills to potential employers. And finally, communities can use them to describe talent that businesses in their area need and the abilities that local people have, and kind of see the gaps between those two. So with that in mind, I'm going to just dive right into Analyst and pull my notes up. And we're actually going to look in a few different places in Analyst to see skills data and relevant data that we can pull from that skills information. So I'm going to start in regions and look at an economy overview. So the economy overview, especially if you're maybe working more local, a smaller college, or just really need to focus on a specific area, the economy overview is really helpful to get a very clear picture of lots of different data sets. You know, you're going to see snapshots here of the labor market, trending occupations, and trending skills. So I have a saved search here that we're going to explore together here of the Seattle metropolitan area, because I'm in Washington State, so kind of a nearby city. But if you really need to hone in on a specific location, I highly recommend, you know, searching by drive time, or we have this radius from address feature that I use all the time and I think is really, really valuable. So just for an example, I can look at 60 miles outside of, let's just stick with our Seattle example, or you can plug in a specific address, you know, your institution, your business, your partner here. And let's click on Seattle. And so it'll just hone in on those, you know, 60-mile radius and select those counties that we want to look at. And now I can select and deselect the counties that I want to include in my search. And if I scroll down, those counties will populate for me. So I can really visualize, you know, how far, how narrow I want to be with my search here. But I'm just going to stick with Seattle and let's run that report. Try not to make everyone too dizzy, but I'm actually going to scroll all the way to the bottom of this report first. And let's look at trending skills in this area. And it's the last data feature here. So in-demand skills in the metropolitan area of Seattle. So we're looking at all occupations, all industries. We're looking at a lot of really broad things here. But this is a good starting point for us to see, you know, what are the trending skills in this area compared to the national average here in the gray. So we're looking at a lot of broad occupations here. Seattle, you know, we're primarily looking at big tech companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, but these skills can show us that actually warehousing and marketing are really popular trends, and then computer science is kind of further down. So using this data, I can scroll back up into my report and now look at the top schools in this area. And those graduate trends. And now using that skills data, I can see what are those related occupations? What are those top occupations in the Seattle area? Primarily office and administrative support, sales, business and financial operations. So seeing, you know, warehousing and marketing, these can kind of align together with what we saw. I can also toggle between and see what's growing occupations. So maybe some skills, you know, if I were to look at this report again, say next year or a couple quarters from now, see how that's changed, how that's shifted, or is it going to maybe grow alongside these occupations? What are some occupations with the top earnings in the Seattle area, and just some other data sets that we can toggle between. I can also look at the top companies. So profiles being those worker profiles. So people, you know, 70,000 people are putting on their profiles that they work for Amazon, Microsoft, and so on, as opposed to the top companies posting for jobs. Next, looking kind of from an industry lens. So are these skills and industries aligning as well? In the larger metropolitan areas, typically seeing government, industry, healthcare, and social assistance, retail trade with Amazon, you know, no surprise there. And again, some more data sets here that I can really visualize depending on the outlook that I need. Some migration information as well. So people coming into Seattle, what are the previous counties that they come from? When they're leaving Seattle, what county are they typically going to? Migration data as well. I'm gonna keep kind of just scrolling just because there's a lot that I want to show and much more related to skills. But just knowing that with the skills data that we just saw at the bottom, what else can we see in this report that might inform our research, and just a good starting point for our research. Also seeing population trends in the metropolitan area of Seattle, number of millennials compared to the national average, retirement risk, diversity and crime data, historic and projected trends in this area. So what are, our jobs growing? Surprise 2020, those jobs went down. And depending on the data set that you're looking at in Analyst, 2020 is obviously going to have a major impact depending on your outlook, like I said. So jobs, that went down. Unemployment, we're going to see 2020, go way up. But thankfully, that number is going down. A further breakdown of unemployment by demographics, educational attainment in this area. So people in the metropolitan of Seattle area have at least a bachelor's degree, some college, high school diploma. So that's good to know going into our search. Maybe I want to look more specifically at a specific education level. Now I can look, 27.2% of people in this area have a bachelor's degree, but there's actually still quite a bit of the population that just has a high school diploma. A further breakdown of the labor force by population. And then comparing some of these data sets, population, number of jobs, cost of living, I can go in here and look at that comparison with the state, our region, the Seattle area with the state, and then I can kind of plug in, maybe compare this data with a city of a similar size, Portland, San Francisco, although that's way bigger than Seattle, but just kind of seeing, what are comparisons here if I need to look at that lens. So that's the economy overview report. Again, a really simple report, but very, very high level to get a good idea of what's happening in an area, what's in demand, including skills. So going back to the home page, I am going to go to occupations, and we're going to look at an occupation overview to really see, what are the top skills for an occupation. And from there, looking at, okay, who's hiring? What's earnings data like? What's that compensation? So going into the occupation overview report, I already have a pre-selected occupation for this example. I'm going to look at web developers in the Seattle area because that's going to give me a lot of data to work with here, considering the market of Seattle. I'm also going to change my time frame and look at the next 10 years. So some projections data, what's going to happen? What is this occupation going to look like, 10 years from now? So again, going into this report, I'm going to scroll all the way to the skills information. Here we go. Okay. So you will see a similar graph across different reports in Analyst that will look like this. So what is this chart telling us? So right now we're looking at specialized skills, those more hard skills that are specific to an occupation. We can toggle with common skills as well, so that more of those soft skills that can span across multiple different occupations or industries. And then finally, software skills. So let's go back to specialized skills. So what is this telling us? So in this dark blue or black, however you see this, we're looking at the frequency of this skill showing up in a job posting, what employers are asking for, primarily user experience when they're looking for web developers. In the light blue, comparing that with, the frequency of the skill showing up in a worker profile, so someone's resume. So depending on the occupation and depending on what you're looking at, this can look wildly different and tell us different things. So right now, employers are really asking for user experience, but it's not really showing up on people's profiles as much. So this could be, an actual gap in talent, or maybe, people don't actually have these skills. They need programs to learn these skills. They need courses to take online. If you're an adult learner, you want to upskill yourself. Employers are really asking for the skill. So now I can look at institutions and businesses that can help me upskill myself. This can also be a resume alignment issue, depending on the occupation and skill. So for example, the fourth one down, we have computer science as a skill that employers are asking for. As a web developer applying for a web developer job, I probably won't put computer science as a skill. I'm going to be way more specific of those skills. What programming languages, what courses did I take, any certifications. I'm not necessarily going to put computer science as a skill. You'll typically see this with like a nursing job or a registered nurse, for example. You'll see nursing as one of the top skills that an employer is asking for, but not a lot of people are putting nursing as a skill on their resume. Again, because you just want to be way more specific if you're applying to be a nurse. I want to, I have a CPR certification or basic life support. So that's just something to keep in mind. Depending on the skill, this can mean different things. So again, if I scroll down a little bit, I can see those hard numbers. Look at, how many postings is this skill showing up in? What's the percent of all those postings? So 56%, that's a lot. Number of profiles and then percentage of total profiles that list user experience as a skill. So you can kind of look at these top 10 here. So with this skills data, what can we look at here now? So I'm going to scroll down and then work my way back to the top. So we can see retirement is low, racial diversity is high, gender diversity is low in Seattle. So getting an overall view of demographics for this occupation, maybe there's a specific demographic that we should focus on with our courses or with our training because they are low. We want to increase diversity in our programs or in this occupation. So this is helpful information to kind of toggle between and look at here. Occupational programs, so what are the top programs that are being mapped into this occupation? Primarily computer science, and then more general than that. And last little data set on this occupation overview, what are the top schools in the Seattle metropolitan area, and those completions numbers as well. So going up, what else is this report telling us now that we have a good idea of this skills information? So here I can see, companies, top companies. Again, this looks similar to what we saw in the economy overview. So top companies and unique postings, primarily Amazon, and then the actual job titles that they're using. So again, what we saw on the slide earlier, skills can really help us define a person's job more so than an actual job title. So we saw user experience as a top skill. And now I can see the actual job titles that employers are asking for that people can apply to. Scrolling up, we can have a bigger snapshot of job posting activity, number of unique postings during the last year, number of employers competing quite a bit, and median posting duration. So, and this chart just kind of compares, monthly unique postings to actual hires. So this can indicate a gap in talent. Maybe we need to hire more people, or maybe there aren't enough people to hire, or maybe an employer just wants to always have postings out there for marketing purposes, especially in the tech world, that's pretty common. So this can tell us different things, but that's just, comparing those two different data sets here. Scrolling up, I can now look at earnings data for this occupation. So regional compensation is 32% higher than the national average in the Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue area. In the black here, seeing that Seattle area, nation in the purple, and then cost of living adjusted in the blue. So looking at those lowest earners, so even in Seattle, still a little higher. I'm fresh out of college. I just got this certification. I'm just starting out of the industry. So what could I be earning in that 10th percentile compensation, as opposed to maybe, I've worked in the industry for a while. I've upskilled myself. I got a master's degree in something, or I took this online course that certified me in this thing. What could I potentially be earning in that 90th percentile compensation? So quite a big difference here, which is fun to see. And I can, depending on the outlook that I need, I can look at annual or hourly data as well. Breaking this occupation up by industry. So people who work in as a web developer are typically in, the other category, but primarily, information services. With Amazon, surprise, electronic shopping and mail order houses is a big chunk of that industry as well. A breakdown of where people are actually working as a web developer: King County, so primarily the city of Seattle, and Snohomish and Pierce. Scrolling up some more, we can now look at employment in this area. So regional employment being higher than the national average here. So Seattle, we can see, is in black, that black line here, and the national average is much lower. And then the state of Washington in the dark blue is still overall a little bit higher. And again, I can add more regions if I want to compare. And this is where we have some of that projections data. So looking at today's, this year's jobs, what are these jobs going to look like 10 years from now? There's still quite a bit of of growth there. So 18% change in the next 10 years. So this is a big occupation, trending occupation. We should really implement our resources and grow our resources to maybe upskill learners, provide courses and programs to help people get in this occupation, because in the next 10 years, I mean, we can really see a lot of growth here. And finally, just a quick summary of what's happening with this occupation in the Seattle area. So jobs are really high compared to the national average. Compensation is really high as well, and then job demand is really high. So again, just confirming what we're seeing in the rest of the report. People who work as a web developer in Seattle, they're doing good, you know, and they're going to continue to be doing well. So with that in mind, let's go back to our home page and jump to job postings. So I'm not going to dive into the job posting analytics report, but again, we'll find a lot of skills information there through a job postings lens. So what employers are asking for, looking at that demand side of the labor market. I'm actually going to dive into a job postings table because there's a lot of flexibility with tables that we can work with. Sometimes tables can be a little daunting, but once you kind of learn to navigate it, I think it's way more helpful to really compare and sort and rank data. Tables are also really helpful if you need to start really broad or high level and whittle your way down to more granular data. So again, we're going to look, we're going to stick with our example here of web developer. I can look by SOC code, ONET code, or our proprietary taxonomy, the global occupation taxonomy as well, depending on how you need to look at these occupations. I'm going to look at Seattle again and stick with our example here and my time frame. So I can use the standard time frame and just look at the last year, which I am going to do, but we can also preset our time frame here and look at, you know, really narrowly the last 7 days, 30 days, and kind of customize that set time frame again. But I'm going to look into last year. And then with tables, we have some initial data points that we can select. So I already have some ones pre-selected here, and I'm just going to go ahead and use those. With job postings, there's a lot of freedom to kind of look at job postings through a different lens. So we have more advanced options to filter, but I'm going to explore those once we're in the report. So let's just go ahead and run this as it is. And while it's loading, you can see that with the job postings table, we have some few areas we can toggle between depending on how we want to look at this. So right now I have skills selected. In the last year of job postings for a web developer in the Seattle area, these are all the skills. I don't know if you can see how small my little drop down is, but there's a lot of skills here, skills, qualifications, and we're looking at all skill types right now. So specialized, common, and software. And depending on how I want to look at this right now, we have it sorted by, you know, what's changed the most in percentage, you know, in the last year, primarily business continuity, planning, space exploration with Blue Origin, Amazon, or Jeff Bezos' space company, you know, no surprise that that's really growing right now, as well as some other here. But I can also sort, you know, just overall, what are the top skills showing up by unique job postings? So I'm going to select the column header, and it's going to sort for me here, and it's going to sort from highest to lowest. So that user experience is popping up again. Communications, JavaScript, front end. So really depends on how you want to look at this data. I can also look at, you know, companies for this occupation, occupation itself. So people working web developers, what are all the other occupations as well? Industry, and then the actual job titles that employers are using. There's a lot of data here to work with, so it just takes a minute to load. While that's loading, it's already loaded. So there's lots of ways that we can manipulate this table here. So with filtering, you know, I want to, let's go back to skill. We can filter and stack more to kind of trim the fat a little bit of our table. I can look at, depending on how broad I want to get with my skill type, I can look at skill, which we're looking at right now, so looking at individual skills, or I can kind of take a step back and look at subcategory, or the biggest bucket, skill category. So information technology, what are all the skills that fall into that bucket, and kind of that next tier down. I can filter and kind of, let's say I want to look at, from the lens of unique postings, I want to look at all skills that are greater than or equal to, 2,000 job postings. So it'll just kind of trim that fat for me, and now we'll only look at job postings that are showing up in the majority of job postings here. So that trimmed it down a lot. I am going to remove my filter and keep going here. I can also select one or multiple of these skills, add it to my filter, and now specifically hone in on those two. I can also exclude them from my results if I don't want to include them in my search. And I can also select these skills and jump to a different report in Analyst. I'm going to leave that for now. On the left-hand side, there's a lot of different ways we can explore job postings data. So we can look at specific job titles and not just an occupation. We can look at specific companies. So what skills are specific companies or a specific company asking for, and what are those job titles related to that, like what's in demand with that company. I can look at any or all skills that or qualification that fall into these job postings, or exclude. So if I took this and excluded it from my results, it'll refresh and automatically populate here for me. So this is the fun part, is kind of organizing by skill type here. So right now I'm looking at all skill types. Maybe I just want to look at certifications. So job postings that mention a specific certification in this occupation and how often they're showing up. So there's a few here. So these are maybe some of the certifications that we can add to our courses, or focus on a bit more. Or let's just look at specialized skill as well. And it'll kind of focus in on that for me. So we can also look by industry, minimum experience required. So I want to look at all specialized skills for someone who's worked in the industry for a while, 3 to 5 years or something like that. I can select that range. I can search job postings through a specific program. So if an employer asks for a specific program explicitly in their job posting, I can kind of search that here and explore what skills are aligned with that job posting as well. Let's say I want to kind of focus in on an education level. So if I want to maybe upskill adult learners who only have a high school diploma or a GED. Let me just make sure I have, so let's deselect that. All of these filters are stackable on one another, so I always just got to remember, what have I already selected? So I can select high school or GED. So looking at job postings that specify, have at least a high school diploma or a GED, what jobs can they go into? What skills do they need? I can, like I just said, these are stackable. So what certifications could they get? What are maybe the common skills or software skills that we can teach them to get these jobs? So depending on your outlook, focusing by education level as well. We can also look at job postings that talk about part-time, full-time, job location, if they're remote or non-remote, especially in today's world post-COVID. This is really interesting to dig into. And then especially looking at company, I can exclude staffing companies and just look at non-staffing. And then if I'm not really sure, the keyword search as well is really helpful. So that's just a lot of ways to play around with the table, play around with the data. I could easily spend hours in the job postings table just because there's so much to work with here. Am I wanting to upskill? Am I wanting to see what in-demand job titles are aligned with an occupation or with a company? So there's a lot here. I'm gonna go back to job postings because there's a couple other places I want us to look. We are going to look at the company talent profile. So looking at all skills through the lens of a specific employer, which in the education space might not be very, very helpful in all situations. But this report can help us, help point us, institutions, learners, and education partners to employer data in a specific region. So sticking with the Seattle area, I'm going to look at Boeing, and I'm going to look at all job types. I'm not going to specify that here as well. So there's a lot in the company talent profile that I'm just going to kind of skip over really quick and get to the meat and potatoes of what we want to look at today. But really quickly, looking at profile data in the Seattle area, so we can see, number of people who work for Boeing, primarily live in Seattle. Next big hub is Everett, where their previous headquarters were, or current headquarters, but Everett is also a big portion of Boeing as well. I can see what the top jobs are and that demand, supply and demand in this area as well. So people who work for Boeing primarily are industrial engineers or some other type of engineer as well. I'm going to scroll down to the skills data because this is actually a really fun graph. So the top skills for all job types sought by Boeing quarter by quarter. So over time, since July, quarter by quarter, what are the top skills that Boeing is really asking for and the frequency, and kind of seeing how these skills have changed and moved by demand over time. So let's say auditing kind of stands out to me. That's kind of gone all over the place, but right now isn't really a skill. But again, we're looking at all job types, so including administrative jobs and not just engineering or software engineer, web development jobs. So this is really interesting to kind of see, what are a company's top competitors. This chart will also, this report will also show us that. What are the top sought after skills and what are their top sought after job types? So another way to look at skills data just from a specific employer lens, if that's where we need to head. Going back into job postings, there is one last place I want to point us, which, surprise, the hot and cold skills by job postings. This is a really, really cool report that I know we're expanding upon over time, but this report is really going to let us see what skills are increasing or decreasing in demand in job postings over a selected time frame. So, let's look at web developer again in the Seattle area and in the last year. And again, because we're looking at job postings, I have the freedom to really expand on my search. How do I want to look at this? So I'm just going to leave it as is, look at web developers in Seattle in the last year. What are the trending skills? What's decreasing in interest? And go from there. So here I'm seeing some new things that I haven't seen in some of our other reports. So at the start of our time frame, in that dark blue or black, however you see it, seeing showing up in postings at the start of our time frame in September 2021, and then in the green and red here, postings at the end of our time frame. So we can see a lot of the big skills that we saw in our previous searches in the occupation overview and in the job postings table. A lot of these are actually decreasing in the time frame, but they're still showing up a lot. And some new ones seem to be emerging as well in our time frame. So this is pretty interesting to look at, especially seeing spaceflight up there. A table view of that data with just some hard numbers that we can dive into deeper. So similarly to what we saw in the company talent profile with that skill demand over time, we can look at skill volatility over time here for web developers by companies by quarter over quarter. So looking very similar to what we saw, user experience, as we've seen over our search and analyst today, pretty consistent, being the top skill showing up in job postings. Communications is still pretty high. JavaScript has been high, still showing up second, but now third. But really getting a good idea of what's changing, what's happening. Agile methodology is kind of all over the place. So this is a really, really fun kind of snake graph to really get an idea of what has been in demand, what is in demand, and help us understand, where a company is trying to go. And again, with this report, we can really hone in on, I only want to look at specific skills or certifications. So let's select that. And let's actually also remove our occupation and just look pretty generally. What are the top just overall specialized skills in the Seattle area. And I probably made a mistake by selecting too broadly because this can take a minute, but so what we saw with the job postings table, there's lots of different lenses we can look at here. Again, by education level, and so on and so forth. So let's see what's changed. So basic life support, food handlers card, MBA. So there's a lot of different top certifications that employers are really seeking, depending on the size of an occupation, the demand of an occupation, and that sort of thing. So these are just some of the top places that we saw in Analyst on skills data and how to look at in-demand jobs, compensation data, and how skills can kind of trend over time. So I believe Chantel might have another thing to add here, but I know we'll have time for questions as well.
Thanks, Megan. That was great. So we have some questions that people have asked. If you thought of a question that you haven't typed in yet, go ahead and put those in the question box. And we will try to get to as many of them as possible. If you think of a question after that we didn't cover, feel free to email us. You can email Megan or myself directly, or you can email your account manager. If you email one of us, we can sort of point you in the direction of your account manager if you don't know who that is. Okay, so a few questions here. First, someone asked where the job postings data comes from. Can you talk about that a little bit?
That is a great question. Yeah, so we are pulling from millions of job posting sites. So anytime an employer puts out a job on the internet, anything that's public facing, Indeed.com, Monster.com, anything like that, we're scraping from that data and informing our work in Analyst and some of our other products as well.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Okay, a couple questions about the occupation overview report that you were showing. In that report, so the time frame that was selected was 2022 to 2032. So it's a 10-year, like in the future time frame. Can you talk about what the numbers, job postings numbers mean when we have a future time frame?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's something to distinguish with the occupation overview, especially. We do include a job posting snapshot. However, we don't have projections for job postings data. We only have projections from the traditional labor market information, that occupational government source data. So when we're in that occupation overview report, when we're looking at compensation, number of jobs, that's where the projections come into play, as opposed to the job postings activity snapshot that we saw in that report. Let's say, unique job postings, number of employers competing, actual job titles, that's all from job postings that is happening today and in more of a recent time frame. So not projections. So that's just kind of something to distinguish. While you are seeing that projections time frame in the occupation overview, it's not going to be, all across the board every time you're looking at time frame in the report. It's just going to look at projections for certain data sets.
Perfect. Thank you. You mentioned this when you were looking at skills that we see, the report that shows skills in job postings versus skills in profiles. Can you explain again how we think about essential skills that show up maybe a lot in job postings but don't show up a lot in profiles?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes, when you're building your resume, and Chantal, I'm sure you have more to add here, but when you're building your resume, you may be thinking very specifically of what you're looking at here. I remember doing this task, I remember getting the certification from just your own experience. So comparing that. So you may not fully be listing all of the skills that you actually gained, whereas an employer, they know what they want, they know what they need. So those maybe not always be, apples to apples comparison of what a skill an employer wants versus what a skill, a worker has. Yeah, I don't know if that fully answered your question, and Chantel, I'm sure you have more to add, but yeah, that's kind of where I see that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that for like for computer science was the example given for that. Like it actually, it's funny because skills like that don't actually show up in even job postings all that often. It's just that the amount of times they show up in profiles is even fewer than the amount that they show up in job postings. So like computer science for, you know, a computer engineer or something like that, a skill that would be deemed essential for the role. If you look at the total number of postings, that skill doesn't actually show up all that often. But in profiles, people are even less likely to say it or to call it that. So like to your example, I think that you gave when you were showing us all, like computer science, if you have a computer science degree, you'll list that you have a computer science degree. The system isn't actually looking at that part of your profile for skills. It's looking for that. It's looking at that to determine what program you were a part of. But that's not we wouldn't consider it a skill. It's the program. It's the name of a program. But within your profile, you would say, you know, these are the softwares I learned. This is, you know, if you learned programming languages, you would include those details. You probably would include like maybe you have project management experience. Maybe you like all these different things that we think of more as skills. Whereas like computer science is really more of a topic of a skill than it is kind of a skill itself. And you mentioned that this happens with a lot of like occupational therapy is a skill. It's also an occupation. So actually, like if you have a degree in occupational therapy, you're not going to say like, oh, I have occupational therapy skills. That's sort of a given. So that's sort of how we think about those essential skills. Now that may be different. Like if you don't have a degree in occupational therapy, maybe you're a nurse, but you have experience in occupational therapy, then maybe that's a relevant skill because it's different from what your education is. Yeah. So maybe that was long-winded, but hopefully that helps. Okay, next question. In the occupation overview report again, in the job titles section that we saw, there's job titles listed. There's also employers listed. Are the job titles related? Do they correspond with the employer that's listed to the left of them?
I don't think so. And Chantel, from the product standpoint, you will have more to add here, but it's by frequency of these job titles and the frequency of these employers. So in the occupation overview for what our examples today, we saw Amazon, Boeing, Microsoft as the top companies who are posting for jobs for this occupation, whereas the job titles are the frequency of these job titles, the actual job titles showing up the most in a job posting. So it's not always one-to-one. I would imagine that Amazon, Microsoft, and Boeing are the ones who are needing a lot of UX designers, needing a lot of software engineers. But I would not read it, left to right as that directly.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The way that like the data works out, if you have, your top employer and your top job title, it is likely that that employer is posting for a lot of those jobs. This is just like how the numbers shake out, but yeah, they're not directly corresponding. Let's see. Yeah, everyone has good questions. Sorry, this is trying to read everyone's questions and there's duplicates and things that we answered.
I think I want to quickly add that I want to specify that I only showed a few places in Analyst today where we see skills data. There's a handful of other places too. The custom report builder in the job postings timeframe, you can really kind of clear out that skills subcategories and categories a little bit more and really customize your layout of your report in that custom report builder. In the profile analytics, you can see skills from the profile's perspective and explore actual worker profiles like you can with job postings, and see what skills people are putting on their resumes a little bit deeper. So there's lots of other places that I highly recommend just spending time exploring in. But I think what we looked at today, occupations and job postings especially, really the main meat and potatoes of where you find skills data from an in-demand perspective.
Yeah. Okay, this question, I will just say that question is about certifications. How are they defined, since degree programs are included in the example? So certifications, it's tricky in education because certifications, like that word means different things. So when in Analyst and in the world of job postings, we think about certifications as like licenses or like certifications in that sense, and not so much like they're not certificate programs. So in education, it gets a little bit muddy as far as like what the definitions of those things. So certifications is not related to degree programs or certificate programs. It's really more about licenses, or like if you are in project management and you have, there's like a whole bunch of different project management certificates that you can get. And particularly in the world of like web developers and computer science, there's a lot of different, like CompTIA is a certification like company that does a lot of that. So that's really more what we are thinking about, more than like programs, if that helps. And then I think the last thing is if you could just show everyone again where to find the skill library. And we'll end with that.
That is a great thing. One quick thing to add about the certifications point, if you're also not fully sure, the knowledge base in Analyst, using the search bar and just literally typing in certificate or certification, I use that all the time, and it will provide, definitions and articles we've written about how to use maybe the certificate data and other things like that, or skills data. But also using like the job postings report or job postings table and selecting certificate, you can see pretty clearly what types of licenses or certifications are we looking at here. So we have some more resources here as well. But let me share my screen again. Okay, so it is at skills.lightcast.io. So from our website, and Chantel, I haven't dug into our website in a while. I don't know if it's a direct link from our homepage quite yet, but skills.lightcast.io is the open skills taxonomy, our skills library, skills categories where you can look at those buckets, what skills fall under healthcare, or the video here, safety engineering, or so kind of exploring those categories a bit more, as well as the skills extractor. So yeah, skills.lightcast.io is a great place to go for that library.
Yeah, that's great. And then if you have additional questions when you're in the tool, there's a chat feature that's staffed by all of our account managers, and they are really great at getting answers for you quickly. So definitely take advantage of that. Thank you so much, Megan, for doing the webinar this month. It was so great to have you and have everyone learn so much about skills. Like I said, the recording of the session will be sent out to everyone who registered, so you look for that in your email, and we will see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.